What's up, and welcome to the Non-Fungible Creator Show. This is your host, Non-Fungible TC, Non-Fungible Today, and Non-Fungible Tomorrow. Today, we are very honored to have Todd, who is the lead artist and creator of Adult Fantasy. He is a multi-award-winning entrepreneur and product specialist. Todd is a 25-plus years veteran of the animation and comics industry and has helped create original IPs for companies including Marvel Entertainment, Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, Warner Brothers, and Kid Robot, and has worked directly with creative legends like Stan Lee, Jeff Koons, who is the most successful American artist since Andy Warhol, and he is also a BAYC member. So GN Todd, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I can't believe it's been 25 years. I feel old.
No, don't say that. I think like your NFTs, you have a de-aging process.
That's right. I just need to apply it to myself. That's coming up next. Yeah.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for being here, Todd. And can you tell us more about your background in the animations and comics industry, and how did you first enter that industry? Because as someone who's from this side of the world, it feels like a dream come true to be working in an industry to shape pop culture.
Yeah, for sure. So I got my start back in 1998. I know, that's what I said. I'm applying the de-aging technology to myself. Coming soon. I had just graduated college, and I was working at an art store, and that was my college job, And at that point, I was really intent on doing comic art full time. So comics is a huge passion of mine, as you can tell by my backdrop here. And but something amazing happened as I was graduating in the late 90s. The comic industry in America tanked. It was just could not get in. Everyone was worried about the end of the industry, and is it going to happen? Nobody was hiring. So I had graduated just in time to not be able to enter the field that I wanted to enter. And I was trying to decide what to do, and certainly working in an art store where the people who come in every day were buying the product, like art utensils. They were basically, professional artists would come in and buy stuff and then go home to use them at their jobs because they were professionals. And I was working at the pro store. So I put myself in a position where I was like, I have to do this. I have to get out of here. I have to be on the other side of the counter. I can't be selling the art supplies. I need to be buying the art supplies. So as it turned out, I was in Atlanta at the time, and Cartoon Network had just launched. And at the time, I was living in a loft with about half a dozen other artists. And one of my friends, Andre, came home, and he came home with this animation test, and he completed it. And sure enough, he got a job pretty quick, I think. And I was like, what's going on? What is this? And he said, yeah, I just got a job with this production company. They're doing stuff with Cartoon Network, and that new network that just came out. And so I went all in, and I said, well, I have to do this. So So without hesitating, I quit my job. I was like, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to do it. So I quit the job. I had no way to pay rent, no way to feed myself, like that was my paycheck. So I was like, screw it. I'm just going all in. And I went to the production company, a place called Primal Screen that was doing all of the early Cartoon Network animation. I met with a producer, a guy named Jim Threlkeld, and I got a animation test, and he showed me how to do it. He said, okay, well, basically they give you a packet, and it was the original like photocopies of pencils, like cells, right? And then a stack of blank inking paper and some photocopies of what the final inks should look like. So I had the pencils, and then the inks had these beautiful, the pencils were really rough, and then the ink photocopies were like gorgeous line weights and just really perfect. And he said, so, basically that's the bar. So you have to beat the bar, match or beat the bar to get to be able to get work. So I went home, and I had no job. So I stayed up all night. Until sunrise, just over and over and over and over and over again. And came back the next morning, and he was really surprised. He was like, man, that's the fastest I've ever seen anyone turn anything around. and I said, well, yeah, but that's because I have to eat. Like I'm broke, man. And they were like, great. Well, we'll call you when we're ready. And so I didn't. A lot of my luck in getting in was me not knowing how things worked, because I had come from a fine art background, not a design background, and not a animation background. So even though I was into sequential art and comics, my major in college was fine art, so oil painting and canvas and stretchers and the whole thing. And so he said, well, yeah, we'll just give you a call. I said, well, do you mind if I stay in touch? And he said, well, no, I don't care. I said, okay, well, when can I call? He's like, I don't know. Call next Wednesday. Cool. And so I called him next Wednesday, and he said, no, there's nothing for you. I said, cool. Do you mind if I stay in touch? He said, no, I don't care. I said, when can I call again? He said, I don't know, next Monday. I said, cool, next Monday. And so every single week I would call him, and over the course of I think it was about 2 months, maybe, it went from who's this to finally, I'll never forget the very last call that they brought me in. He just was like, oh, hey, man. Yeah, hold on. And you could hear him put his hand over the phone and say, yeah, that guy Todd is calling. That kid, yeah, the one that keeps calling. Can we put him on something? Can we just bring him in? So I had just bugged him enough, right, to where they brought me in. And then I quite honestly refused to leave. I just stayed there. I spent the night there. They had a stacked, like a fully stocked kitchen. So I was broke, and so as long as I stayed there, I had a bathroom and I had some food, and I was just animating. And I started off as an inker. That was my first work. And yeah, really quick, interesting story on the first job. So I was another lucky thing was the very first job I had as an inker was inking these tiles from a Huckleberry Hound commercial, and the way the commercial proceeded was, Huckleberry Hound was working on this construction site, and he was kind of using a jackhammer and he knocked something over, and concrete hits the screen, and then it screen wipes to the classic checkerboard, Cartoon Network checkerboard, and then that cracks off, and then you see the logo. And so my job was to ink all of the concrete hitting the screen and cracking off and then falling. Well, I was so nervous. I was literally shaking, like my hand. I could not keep my hand still. I was shaking so hard. And so I'm like, I'm going to die. They're going to fire me. I've never done this. I had never inked anything before, because I was outside of the test. I was a penciler I had trained myself to be a penciler for comics, for American comics. So I was inking all these bricks, my hand shaking, and the director came up and said, man, those are the most amazing cracks I've ever seen, And I was like, well, yeah, and, I just tried to play it off, but it was purely just because I couldn't keep my hand, from shaking, and became perfect cracks. If I'd had to draw like a perfect square or a circle, I would have been fired on the spot. So that was the start of it.
That is amazing, because right now you could just redo, but back then, once you screw up, you just have to. Can you redo? Like, how does it work?
Well, yeah. Well, you just either you take that piece of paper, crumple it up, toss it away, and take another sheet, or you just have like whiteout pens or white acrylic paint. Yeah.
But people can see it.
Yeah, exactly. They see your mistakes everywhere. Right.
Well, that's a very amazing origin story. Like all superheroes, right? They all have really cool.
Just keep doing it. Yeah, it's amazing how much work you get when you just refuse to leave, and you're just a hobo living in the back of a animation studio. So, yeah. And that's how you started, shaping pop culture and, creating the things that people grew up with, like harassing your potential employers. That's right. That's exactly right.
So, out of curiosity, how did you first encounter the blockchain and NFTs, and what was your initial thoughts towards it?
That's a good question. So, I initially discovered it. I think it was 2013. And I say I think because it didn't make such a huge impression that I remembered the day and time. So I was in New York, and I was at a meetup, and the developers, it was a investor and developer meetup, and one of the investors and one of the developers were talking about a new project that new technology they had just created or were working to develop, and it was the idea of assigning a unique hash, a unique code, right, a string to an image, right, like a JPEG, so that now you could have these unique JPEGs. And I don't know if the terminology non-fungible token had been used. I honestly don't remember. But it was a really interesting talk, and I remember being way over my head because at that point it was a very technical talk, and I remember being incredibly interested in it, but I didn't see a way in at that phase, not just for myself but for other artists. Because at the time I was building platforms for artists, and I was already creating products to help other creators, like designer toys. I was already making platforms for other artists to try to get exposure, and I didn't see a really simple way to explain what it was they were talking about, because I barely understood it, right? Because it was just so high level. And so I kind of just filed it away and kind of went on, and I kind of, now hindsight looking back, I'm like, I wish I could be like, yeah, I'm OG. I was 2013, but I just was like, okay, this is super interesting. And I definitely think there's something here, but I just have to kind of remember it and just kind of move on with my life. And then at the beginning of, it was really at the beginning of 2021, it was a little bit in 2020, but mostly 2021, like January, I just said, oh yeah, I remember. I don't remember what it was that brought me back. It's probably something in the news, probably something popped and came across my feed. And I was like, oh yeah, I think that sounds like, kind of remember something like that. And I started to look, and all of a sudden I saw how big the ecosystem had gotten, right? OpenSea was here, and all these people were talking, and new projects were launching, and they were like in its infancy, but still was already a culture around it. It was like mind blowing to me. I was like, oh no way. That thing from like 10 years ago, or whatever, however many years ago, I was like, oh my God, like it's time to, like, it's actually happening now. And so that hooked me. I was like, okay, so that thing finally arrived. Let me actually like take a look at this. And then I was all in.
Wow. So by all in, you mean you start buying NFTs, you start collecting NFTs, and you start thinking about a new project that you can do.
I dropped everything. It's very similar to my story with getting into animation. Like when I have a lot of conviction. So when I decide to do something, or when I see something that I believe to be an opportunity, sometimes you have to make hard decisions. Like I was, by this point I was already like, I advise a lot of startups and a lot of tech companies, and I enjoy it thoroughly. But the artist side of me is always there, right? And I've done that. I've kind of kept both of those tracks going, both from a business side, assisting and advising and mentoring other entrepreneurs and other founders, and then the other track is like building up an art portfolio and continuing that side of my passion, because I've made a career out of that. And when I saw the NFT market, at least where it was at the beginning of last year, it was if you had taken the Venn diagram of Todd, right? I was like I could see my own personal historical Venn diagram laid across the market. Like if in one corner was creative brands and intellectual property, right? And in another circle there was fine art, right? And then in another circle there was like startup building, right? So technology and startups, fine art, like one of one, right? And the creative IP, like Bored Ape Yacht Club or things like that. And right in the center was me. Do you know what I mean? Like I had experience in all of these things. Yeah. And so I think it was just a little bit of like, it was definitely like a big aha moment for me, where I was like, I get this, right? Like I totally understood what was happening just because of my personal background. And I think because of that bullseye for me personally that I felt, It also allowed me to see like what wasn't there that I think should have been there, right? And that's how we kind of started. I said, we have to go all in. I'm going all in, right? And unfortunately, I had a lot of great friends and partners who were like, yeah, let's do it. And we all dropped everything and went all in and began adult fantasy.
So yeah, that's a good intro to our next question, which is about adult fantasy. So I have the screen right now, but just before we jump into adult fantasy, I was just curious about your story about your Bored Ape. So what drove you to buy your Bored Ape? Because you use your Bored Ape as a character in adult fantasy as well.
Yeah.
So what happened back then? You saw this, you saw the art, and you do have training in the comics and animation background, right? So what was your thought to it, and why did you just ape it?
Yeah, so I got in really early. It was I got in I think like a week after mint. I watched it mint, and I'm a real cautious person when it comes to like buying stuff. And again, I think the experience of being a collector, at least in comics and animation, like I have a lot of comics, I've got a lot of toys, I've got a lot of original comic art, I've got a lot of original animation art that I collect. And so I tend to, I like to see what happens, right? Because people buy into the fear of missing out, and then you kind of want to see, okay, was it just the hype, or is there something here? And for Bored Ape, like I loved the art. I thought the art was really cool. And at the time, the thing that made me move on it, to be honest, was I thought the art was really cool, and we were already thinking about adult fantasy, and the thing that I was really interested in the most was from Bored Ape was when they began talking about allowing the buyers, the collectors, to own the IP, to be able to use their character as their own, like basically develop that character, because that is something that I relate to, and that is something that I was building towards. And so I thought it would be really cool. And of course, you could have never known that Bored Ape would have been what it is now. But even at that time, I was like, oh, that'd be cool if I could, if they allow us to use the character, then maybe we can integrate it and do something with it. And I really like the idea of the challenge that we were addressing and that we are addressing has to do with the difference between creating designs and creating characters. Not a lot of people know how to create characters. Design is very easy, right? And we can go into a little bit more about what I mean by that if you want. But I saw the ability to take a really cool design and turn it into a character, and that. So I purchased it, and then got embedded into the community, and got to know some people, and their thoughts also informed me to help me form the project, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think this is a very inspiring way. I mean, it's inspiring sharing from you, because a lot of people got into Bored Ape because of the financial aspect. Like back then, it was going up and up and up and up, but you got in from the cultural aspect. You got in from the pop culture aspect, because you wanted to get this IP, you believe in the concept, and you wanted to develop it into characters, right?
Yeah.
And you see that potential because you work in all of these companies in the past, and the reason why we love comics, why we love watching Marvel and Disney, is because of the characters, how they're being developed, how we relate with the struggles, and how relatable these characters are.
Right. You said it yourself, it's the story, right? And that's something that is very different. When you're generating, I mean, if you look at it this way, like Marvel Entertainment has over 8,000 intellectual properties, right? So they have over 8,000 characters, not designs, characters. Each one of those characters somewhere has a backstory. They fought heroes or villains. There's at least one comic book out there with their story that gives them some kind of universal lore that places them within the universe, right? And I think right now that is actually being overlooked, and I see that as an opportunity, not just for adult fantasy for us, but for everybody, because it is much easier to create. You know, I think there's this divide where people are looking at the number and saying, well, Marvel took 100 years or 80 years to come up with 8,000 characters. We can do it generatively in 30 minutes, right? But what you have is you don't have 10,000 characters when you release a set. You have 10,000 designs. Some of those certainly can become characters, right? I think you can look in a really good example in Bored Ape Yacht Club is Jenkins the Valet, right? Where he took that character or that design and turned it into a character and turned it into a novel, and now is building a world around that character, right? But what you have at first are X number of designs. These are shapes with different color shapes on it that look like it could be a character, right? Different hats, different noses, different faces, but there's nothing below the shoulder. What do their legs look like? What's their back look like, right? Like there's nothing from the get-go that differentiates NFT number 4736 from NFT number 2719. You can't tell me the difference other than the design is different.
Yep.
Right? This one has a green background. That one has a blue background. You can't really tell me the difference of the character. Whereas if I asked you what's the difference between Iron Man and Spider-Man, you could tell me a history of them, right? And so building a character takes time. And so I think the future of NFTs, I think if you're truly, and it depends on everyone has different goals. So it really depends on the goal of the project, the goal of the person purchasing, the creator, wherever, on whatever side the creator is on, you know, whether you're saying, oh, this project is allowing me the freedom to own the copyright for this, and I can turn this into my character, or whether it's a project that wants to create a series of characters and kind of grow out a global brand. I think it's really important to understand the difference between those two things. And so what we're looking to do with adult fantasy is actually build an engine that allows for that, right? If that makes sense.
Absolutely. I just want to jump in to say something before we go to adult fantasy. Is that
Sure.
I'm really glad that we had this conversation, because a lot of people were asking me, oh, why are people spending millions and thousands of dollars in buying a Bored Ape? And I said, well, you would spend millions of dollars to get into a yacht club, you know, to be a part of a community, to use this facility. So the Bored Ape is basically the same. It's kind of like a membership where you have different people who are celebrities and stuff like that. So it kind of makes sense. But now you're giving another aspect towards it, because you're saying that actually each Bored Ape could be developed into a character. So for example, for your Bored Ape, so the pricing is no longer based on the rarity itself, but based on the character itself.
Right. 100%. Exactly. Yeah. And I think you already see it. The funny thing enough is it started, the first place I noticed this, even before Bored Ape was, you know, I mean, look at some of the fantastic influencers that are in the space. And most of them started off with CryptoPunk avatars, right? Because the CryptoPunk was a sign of social proof, right? That they made a good call, that they supported the top project. And they, of course, Bored Ape people do the same thing. But when you're reading their tweets or following them on social media, there is a persona that is created between what they post and the avatar image, right? You notice that they kind of become some especially, right? Some of those influencers have become their persona so much that they have shoes with their icon on it. They have you know, paintings with their character on it. Like there's all these kind of they're generating their own intellectual property based off of the persona that they're putting out on Twitter, just as being them. They have tied the avatar to them personally, therefore creating a character, right, of themselves. And so the next step is like, okay, well, the next step is removing the self and applying it to an actual, you know, a fictional character, right? Like a character that is like not real, right? So you're kind of creating this persona between yourself as an influencer and your icon, your avatar. Now, now you're taking it a step further with something like a Jenkins de Ballet or adult fantasy, where it's like, okay, here's the character. Let's tell the story of the character that is not me, right? We're going to let them live their own life and build up their own library of stories and adventure, right? And then you can start to build a library of characters and a library of I mean, that's how you build a brand.
All right, so let's jump into adult fantasy.
Sure.
So can you tell us more about the project and the concept behind it?
Yeah. So adult fantasy is a crowdsourced superhero universe, and the way that we work is, for the first launch, what we ended up doing was we created a technological breakthrough grading system where the NFTs de-age over time. So this is a great example of it, right? So what we want to do is we're bringing a community together whose interest is in, as you mentioned, developing a character, right? So if I own a one-of-one character and you own a one-of-one character, there's not a lot of motivation for me to help you, right? And there's not a lot of motivation for you to help me because you own your character and you want to develop your thing, and I own my character and I want to own and develop my thing. And certainly we can partner up and work on something together where both of our characters are working together. But what we saw an opportunity for was the ability to have a community come together around a single character, and so that as elements grow and as the brand expands and as apparel and toys and comics and stories are created around a singular character or a group of characters, everybody who owns that NFT gets more exposure in the marketplace. Their asset gets more exposure, and all the boats rise up. And one of the things that we wanted to, with that said, we didn't. So while we wanted to create a set number of characters, right? We also wanted to take advantage of the generative nature of NFTs. So how do you say, hey, this is a set of 25 characters, but how do you make them all different, right? And why would you want to do that, right? So the de-aging mechanic we thought was a really fun way to install that. Plus, it ties into our sense of humor a little bit. Like there's just not a lot of projects that say, yeah, we have 2,000 uniquely generated NFTs featuring 25 non-generated characters. People are like, wait, what? Like, how do you? I don't understand. Like, they're non-generated, but they're generated. So so one of the things that we looked at was in the marketplace was the actual grading system of traditional collectibles. So pop culture collectibles all have grading systems, right? So whether you're collecting video games or whether you're collecting baseball cards or records or comic books, these have grades. They're graded, and the reason that they're graded is because in the real world, these things degrade over time, right? By the first appearance of Spider-Man in 1960, whatever, and nobody thought it was worth anything. So today, trying to find a mint copy is almost impossible, and that rarity makes it worth millions. It's incredibly hard to find, and so we thought it would be a fun experiment to see if we could do the same thing, so that was effectively where it started. I mean, it goes a little deeper into that, where we one of the other things we thought that was fun was NFTs flaws are subjective, right? And so one of the things that we thought would be fun to play with was the idea of perfection, because in the digital space, everything is perfect forever, all time. Right? If I create an image, it's perfect. If you create an image, it's perfect. If I try to make that image look damaged, right? If I jump into Photoshop or Painter or Procreate or whatever, and I try to make that image look damaged, it's still perfect because I had to make it look damaged, and it's actually more work to make it look damaged than it is to not make it look damaged, right?
Yeah.
And either way, you have a perfect image. So all of these NFTs are perfect forever, and so there's nothing that differentiates them. And you know, thinking forward a few years, you know, in 5 years, the NFT space, doing an NFT search is going to look like a Google image search. I mean, there's going to be billions of them, and all of them or most of them are going to be perfect images. And so we thought there was a really unique opportunity to create something that would not be perfect, right? And again, it had a little bit of that sense of humor where, you know, we thought if you started it pristine and de-aged it over time, that would be a negative experience, at least for a first launch, right? And then we started thinking about it. It's like, well, how can we create this randomization, and so that everyone gets like this different grade or potentially different grade? You know, we don't know. And every card can start its own journey and have its own life, and where it stops, nobody knows. And have a little bit of our sense of humor embedded in there. And I said, well, what if everybody gets like, what if everybody on Mint gets this card that is just looks like shit? Like it just looks terrible. It's just a poor condition. It looks like a bus hit it. It's folded. It's like wrinkled. It's crinkled. It's torn. Like, let's make it look awful. You know, the card that nobody would want, right? And then over the course of time, it de-ages and actually improves in quality, because that's not only is that a better experience and it's fun, but that's not something that can happen in real life. So you were taking something that is done in real life and putting a little spin on it to make it completely unique to the NFT space, completely unique to the digital space. It cannot be done in another way. It has to be done in a digital way. You can't just magically de-age things in real life. And so that was kind of where the project started to gain legs, at least in our mind, and then we had to actually implement and execute on it.
Yeah, and can you share us more about the characters, the character design? As you said, a backstory, the story of the characters is important. Right? So I know all of these characters. Like, we don't have time to go through all of the characters, but just like the overall concept of these characters.
Yeah. So I'll give you a little bit on the design side, the concept of the design, and then a little bit of the world. So on the design side, I was really wanting to tap into that classic Cartoon Network 90s vibe. That's the style that I just love, right? So for me, it was a little bit of a passion. I was like, yeah, let's create like, if this was an animated show, let's create a set of characters that feels like could walk the line between mediums, right? So for instance, if I was a animator, I could look at any one of these characters and I could remove some of the art, like some of the detail, and it would be ready to animate as a model sheet. Likewise, as a comic artist, if I was drawing the comic book and I needed to reference the characters to see what they look like, then the detail is all there, and I could add to it or add flourishes to it however I wanted. So there was a lot of thought put into the actual style that I personally chose. But the project's also not limited to that because it's going to be community built. It's just what I personally chose to put forward, right? And of course a nod to both the Marvel Comics and Cartoon Network. So I wanted to look somewhere there. And, you know, of course I'm a huge Alex Toth fan and like Venture Brothers. So I wanted to kind of mold that into a ball and kind of push it out. And in terms of the story, well, all these characters live in a place called Hyper Brooklyn. And I don't want to give too much away into the actual story because we're about to do like some reveals on like some big lore drops. But the way that we see these characters interacting, there's a few different ways. The most important way is that holders of the NFT control the destiny, right? So you have whatever character you have the right to make products and sell whatever you want and keep 100% of it. Like, that's totally cool. And add to the lore. So as we create, as we start to release the actual story behind it, which is coming pretty soon, everybody in the community, even people who don't own the NFT, we'll actually have a way for them to contribute as well. Can start to create their own characters, can start to create their own lore, can say, hey, this is this is Beelzebubby, and you know what? She actually lives over here, right? And she does this. This is her daily routine. Maybe this is a story in her life, and the community can start to take the stories that it likes for the character and make them canon inside of the universe. So in terms of how the characters interact with the world and what the world is about, I don't want to give too much away, but I will say that we have this overall umbrella structure, and we know exactly what the world is and how it behaves and why it's there. And the way that the characters interact, each character has their own background and their own ways that they interact with that universe, with the world. But their ultimate direction is up to the community and everybody who wants to put in. And so as you look at the NFT, most NFTs are just the image, right? But for ours, it actually has a front and a back. So if you flip that card on the other side, you can actually see the power, you can see the biography, you can see exactly like what the characters do and how they interact. So, and some of the characters are related to each other as well. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and actually we do have some live audience, and they do have some questions, so we could reply them as well, right?
Yeah, of course.
One is from Wildy. Like, how do you envision the next AF release going? Similar amount of characters?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, so what we are doing right now, that's a wonderful question. So one of the things that we're doing right now is, I think we're big on experimentation. We really like the idea of testing lots of things, seeing what works, and then keeping the things that work really well. And in fact, if you click, by the way, we launched this new button. If you look at the bottom right of your player, you'll see that little button.
Okay, it's a full screen
button. Right? And then you can zoom in on, I don't know if you're using a Mac or PC, but yeah, you can zoom in. So we're actually, and this is not 100%, but we are right now looking at doing more regular drops, like smaller batches, regular drops throughout the year, special items, characters, and probably most importantly, we're creating an engine and a system right now for you to create your own characters. We don't want this is not just about Todd creating his own characters and me launching as many characters as I want, which I will do, but it's not about me, right? It's about creating a brand together. And I think the way that we can all do that is by creating a brand together. So we're right now very focused on creating a platform and an engine that will allow anybody to come in and put a little bit of work in and have some fun and participate in the community. And if the community decides that the character is worthy, that character becomes an NFT in the universe. And the creator of that NFT gets all of the benefit of having an NFT out there, whether it's primary sales or secondary sales. We want to make sure that everybody is happy and satisfied, and that contributors are rewarded.
Wow, that is very exciting, because you could mint one of these characters in the future could be done by the community members. Like, I mean, that's what you're saying. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And there are other questions as well. Like, what are the Grail NFTs? What makes them special? The signed cards.
Yeah. So the Grail NFTs. So the Grails are super rare. So Grails are one of ones. They are the first ones, I believe, are signed. So if you go down, I don't know what, it's really small on my screen. But the signed cards are Grails. And so the other thing that's interesting about the technology that we've invented is that we have the ability to create really special limited effects So in traditional card collecting and like for artist series, you have something called a chase card, and the chase card is that one of one super special card that you're chasing down, right? So sometimes it's an autograph card, sometimes it's chrome, sometimes it's a hologram or holographic holofoil card or gold foil card. There's a tremendous number of ways to create something unique and special. There you go. And so these were our first Grails. And so they are one of one team signed cards. And so something that we are interested in and what we're hinting at with this is that, we have the ability to do really special drops for people, right? So Grail cards are very, very special, and they're given out very sparsely. I think we've given out we gave out one to one person and then one to the group, one to the faction. So.
Oh wow, there's an animation here as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really cool like what you're doing because as you said, the cards can evolve at the same time. They could de-age, and you were adding new functions to the viewer as well. And because as they kind of de-age, right, it means that the graphic itself could change. So what I'm envisioning is that maybe one day I could have like a normal card, but I meet you in reality, and I'll be like, "Hey Todd, can you sign my card?" And maybe there could be a function where suddenly a signature appears. Who knows, right?
No comment.
No comment. But yeah, I was just thinking about this.
You are very astute. Yes. No comment.
So yeah, like to be honest, I didn't grow up with trading cards. So when I saw this, I was like, wow, this is just so cool. It's like an NFT. It's not just a static image like people say a JPEG, but it is a living and breathing thing that changes every time. And so before checking out your project, like I'm not familiar with like the grading system with traditional trading cards, but do you think so? I understand that your grading system is actually one that you created for this project, and out of curiosity, is this inspired by traditional grading card system, and whether like because we all know NFT is like a token standard, right? So in the future, for let's say in the world of trading cards, NFT trading cards, so are you creating a standard using this grading system?
Yeah, both. Yes, on both. So the original inspiration certainly was traditional grading, card and comic grading, and video game grading. The practical outside of the fun experimental side of saying, oh well, bringing rather than just the fun de-aging aspect and the grade goes up over time and where it stops nobody knows, like beyond the kind of the core game mechanic, the real practical application that we saw in this and still see in this is especially for if whether you're a project creator and you're creating a generative project or you're a one-of-one artist. Well, let's take the example of a one-on-one artist. If you're a one-of-one artist, you can't. There's no way for you to really match the output of a project that creates 10,000 PFPs in a generative way, right? Because you're a one-of-one artist, so you're creating something, whether traditionally or digitally, and you're releasing it. So your output is greatly diminished when compared to an algorithm that can just pump out tens of thousands of variations. The way that traditional artists make up for this is through the release of editions or prints. So we do a limited edition monograph or something. There's 500 of them, and maybe there's 3 artist proofs or something. So you're multiplying that original piece, but you still have to keep it capped, because if there were too many, the set wouldn't be worth anything because they're all 100% identical, right? So we see this as an opportunity for other one-of-one artists to now have new tools to say, well, wait, I can now create. I could create 500 of them and they could have unique autographs, or I could create 10,000 of them and maybe some of them de-age, or maybe there's a different color, or maybe there's a special border, or there's something else that can be added that makes 10,000 unique generative NFTs out of my 25 or 15 or one unique image, right? So it's a way to take what a traditional or digital artist does and magnify it, right? So we see that as a huge opportunity. And so yeah, so coming from grading and then applying that to other people and other situations is something that we're completely that's the future for sure, I think. The same thing for generative projects. Generative projects need ways to create special incentives, right? Special drops, special incentives. And then you have influencers someone who, for instance, may have a Bored Ape, right? That wants to monetize on their brand recognition, right? Well, how do they do that? Well, now they can take their Bored Ape and they could actually, or their whatever they have, and they could actually apply that. And now they have a tool set where they can multiply and magnify their reach and actually have their supporters come on board and own a derivative that they're creating, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my next question would be like, what could the community look forward to with regards to adult fantasy, which I think you kind of tease it as well. That's why I'm not gonna drill in deeper because you kind of said like the laws, the backstories are gonna start, being released.
Yeah.
So all of these are in the Discord channel. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll tell you that. So we're developing in two fronts, right? We have the technology front and we have the brand IP front. So on the technology front, we're continuing to develop the technology, the things that we have in the most immediate pipeline. And I'll say this, the most exciting thing for me personally is that we're working on historical data tracking. So you will have another button on that little window, and when you click it, it'll pull up essentially we envision looking like a stock chart, right? And it'll actually show the entire historical history of your NFT, right? So it'll show where the centering and the edges and all of the surface, like you'll actually be able to see exactly how it's changed over time. And then we're going to have some way where you can actually compare it to other images and other NFTs in the same collection, right? So I kind of envision like a leaderboard, like, Vorpal Trickster number 47 just passed Vorpal Trickster number 52, right? Or whatever. So you can actually start to see a leaderboard within the actual and historical data within the player itself. So we really do see the player as a platform, right? It's so whether you're on OpenSea or Rarible or LooksRare or whatever comes next, your NFT always comes with you, right? Like it's not you don't really own the platform. You're going to OpenSea to look at the things that you own. So that thing, instead of having to go somewhere else to see how your thing is doing, we like the idea that your thing should know how it's doing, right? You should be able to see it. And so on the technology side, we're going deeper into that side. And eventually we'll have some really like a user interface, and that's down the road where we can do things and open it up more to the public. I think that's the future goal. On the creative side, on the branding side, on the character side, we're in the process of creating and launching a new, I hesitate to call it a game. I would say it's a new game mechanic, similar to the way that the NFT has its own game mechanic. So it's a game engine, maybe, where we're launching something called an original character tournament. And so I don't know if you're familiar with original character tournaments, but it's a way in which you can create and release your own characters into the world of adult fantasy and develop them in such a way that possibly they become part of the adult fantasy universe.
Yeah, those are the things that people are definitely looking forward to. So for people who are watching who has not joined the Discord yet but want to take part in this community, the Discord is on the website. It's here. You could just join the Discord, take part in this community, take part in the creation of an IP. Like it is very exciting because NFT has provided a way that anyone could, be on board with a team of people, like really, like the way, I mean, your work speaks for yourself. Like the work, the NFTs, the engine that you have, the player that you have speaks for your team, like the quality of your team. And you are, as you introduce yourself, you work with the likes of Marvel, you work in Cartoon Network and so on. So NFT is it's so amazing that NFT has opened a way for people around the world to be on board in the same team with like the top trendsetters, pop culture creators, and together you could all create an IP together. I think that's very meaningful.
100%. I think the most amazing thing to me is that if you look at the 20th century, even the 21st century, the way that these projects were built, I mean, these large brands, Marvel, Disney, it was incredibly centralized because that was the structure, right? Everything is tightly controlled. And the thing that always drove me nuts as a creator was that there was a lack of recognition of the fans. And for a long time, especially through Stan Lee's tenure, the fans were recognized. He was really good with the fans. But as the industry became more corporate, the fans and the customers became, the fans became less about input and more about just buying shit, right? From a corporate standpoint, like the corporation stopped caring what the fans thought or said or responded to, right? And instead it was like, you're a consumer, buy my thing, so therefore you buy another thing, right? And they forgot, in my opinion, they forgot that it's the fan, it's the community that makes the character. It's not the company, it's the fan base, it's the audience that makes the character. Always has, always will. An example would be, like, take a character, like I use Venom as an example, right? So Spider-Man villain, say you could take Spider-Man as well, but you just take Venom. Like, technically Venom was created by Todd McFarlane as the artist, and the writer was David Michelini. And they were the ones that created the comic and the story that Marvel released, right? But it's the fandom that said, whoa, what is that? Give us more of that. No, we don't want this other thing. Just give us more of that. And so as they started, they released the story and then they move on to other characters, but the demand was so strong from the fan base that all of a sudden they start to bring the character back a little bit more. And all of a sudden they bring the character back even more because the demand is not stopping, it's increasing. And all of a sudden they're like, well, what? Maybe Venom isn't enough. Let's create Carnage. And now we have two kind of like Venom characters. And now there's a whole Venom universe now with like 1,000 different, Spawn-like, venomous characters, and there's movies. And so all of that stuff comes from the heart and soul of the community, of the fan base. And it's a huge opportunity for us, all of us, because these corporations don't get it, and they're never going to get it. They're so locked into the way that they build things that there's an opportunity to go in and do whatever it is that you want to do because they can't compete on this level. There is no way on God's green earth that any large company is going to give you direct access to the intellectual property. It's not going to happen. It's control. I mean, there are teams and teams of lawyers that will stop you, right? Whereas if you're young enough and you have a young mind enough, you can look at this and say, wait a minute, it took 50 to 100 years for Disney to become Disney and Marvel to become Marvel, and look how it controls our culture. Every single thing that's on television or streaming or anything, any type of content that's really rises up, most of it has come out now of some kind of fan base. The fan base is already there, And all these companies love that because they don't have to try to sell something now. They just suck in that audience that's already existing. So they don't have any problem like sucking the life out of an audience with a property, right? But they're not willing or able to say, why don't we create something together? And so I think what you're seeing with Bored Ape Yacht Club and with Adult Fantasy are these new sparks that are saying, wait a minute, we don't need anybody else. You know, when we create the characters and we create the lore, and if we're a community that's passionate enough to stick with it for just not 100 years, like a few years, that is going to attract massive attention, and that is going to bring the community into the forefront. So it's going to be a fan-led and owned universe, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and the fans get rewarded by it. They aren't just paying the corporate, for the merchandise and things like that, but fans actually do own the IP. They could make their own merchandise and get rewarded by being active and being in this community. I think that's a very great wrap up for our whole show today. As we're almost at the 1 hour mark, but thank you so much, Todd.
I was ready for 6 more hours. What are you talking about?
We'll have more shows hopefully, and everyone, if you're listening to this, if you really like what Todd is sharing, I mean, it's very insightful because he has been in the industry for quite some time. He does his AMAs regularly, so he is someone who does engage with his community. And to be honest, I'm just a community member. I got in secondary. I reached out to him, and then he said, "Oh, let's do this show." And then we finally got into time to schedule. So, Todd, thank you so much. And before we end, is there anything that you would like to share before we wrap up?
Okay, so this is me pinging you because we were talking about something before in the green room. Can you remind me about that? Because that was
yes, I was talking about your thoughts on the doxxed team in the future for NFT projects. Yeah, you were saying that.
Perfect. Yeah. So we were discussing like the way things are and the way things may be headed, and so I think in terms of the way teams are built, we launched in 2021, and we were there weren't that many doxxed teams. Right. And I understand why. There's a lot of people that need to keep their identity secret because of their day job or something like that. But I think what you're going to see is that more and more there should be and needs to be at least a member of the team that is fully doxxed, because it has now become too easy. I mean, the strength of our market and our space is also its greatest weakness, right? Anybody can do this, which means anybody can do this. And so the biggest challenge you have as a team, especially if you're just starting out, is trust, because people don't know you. They've never heard of you. They don't know your project. Who the hell are you? Right. And as time goes on, more and more people have been scammed at least once. I've been rug pulled. I'm sure it happens to everybody. And so the minute that happens, your defenses go up, and you start clicking less links, and you start trusting less. And that's fine. But if you're a team, you need to putting yourself out there provides some at least initial trust to say, wait, this is a real person with a real background, with a real LinkedIn profile, someone who's, I don't know if the project is good or bad, but at least they're not like, at least there is someone there who is what they say they are. Right. And it doesn't have to be anything special. Even if you're just, it could be any member of the team. Right. It doesn't have to be like someone with a crazy background. Any member of the team, just have someone who is there, who can be a face, who can be on camera, who can do interviews without having to like wear filters, because I think this is how we connect. You know what I mean? We connect eye to eye and face to face. And at least for me, and this is a personal thing, I can only speak for myself, but as I've been in this space longer, and as I see more and more and more projects come out, if I go to a site and I don't see at least a member of the team that is doxxed, I almost dropped the project. Right? I think newbies go for it. And I can't speak for everybody, but for someone who's bought a lot of NFTs and has been doing this now all day, every day for a full, more than a year now, like if I see a completely hidden team in my mind, my personal mind, I'm like, it's a little bit of a strike. I'm like, I don't know, then I'm going to try to talk to the founder, or I'm going to jump into the Discord. I really have to, it forces me to work harder as a fan and as a potential
collector,
buyer, right? Because it's actually easier than to not buy your thing and just wait till post mint and then see, oh, it didn't get rugged. Cool. Maybe I'll go into that. You know what I mean? So I think as we move forward, you're going to see more and more teams be public, or I hope we will. Because I think it benefits everybody to be more human, to be more to add more of a connection to it,
and to really engage with the community. Because if you're anonymous, how could people really know who you are, and how could they support what you're passionate about? Because
that's right.
NFTs, like, we're supporting each other's dreams in the space.
I know, and I mean, look, I know that not everybody can be as incredibly attractive as me, and as incredibly sexy as this, but still, even if you're not as iconic as this beautiful face, I think everybody can. I know it can be hard to do, and there's a lot of fear about putting yourself out there, but the benefits outweigh the risks, and I think you summed it up really well, and that it's the best way to communicate and connect with your community and with other people, and you're never going to get your message across any better than being able to just be yourself.
Yeah, and just to add to what we discussed in the green room, like before the show, we talked about how initially there was going to be 10,000 NFTs at first for the minting for adult fantasy, but you were reactive to the market, and then you decided to make it into 2,000. So another thing is that creators have to be more reactive.
100%. I mean, we looked at the number of people in Discord, and we looked at the size of the community, and we had a decision. Like, we knew that there were ways we could pump the community, right? Artificially, which is what a lot of people do. There's a million ways to just bring in as many people as we can and sell out. But if we had done that, we believe that we would have had less engaged people, right? And our number one goal is to have a really strong community of people that understand the project, really dig the project, and are on board with what we're really doing. Like, we want people that are completely behind it, right? And so with that strong community mindset, we said, look, we're not everybody in our community, if they've been in it for any period of time, knows that we're definitely not a project that's pushing like short-term gains. Right? This is a long-term building of a franchise. It's not corporate funded, it's community built from the ground up. And so it's important to keep that integrity, right? And it was about proving that we could do it and completing that first phase of the project, and knowing that would open up new opportunities this year, which it did. And
talking about community, someone from the live audience said, I need to shout out to Henis. So a shout out to Team Henis. Thank you for being here.
Henis crew is in effect, right? Yeah. Henis is one of our characters, and Henis has a very strong following. He's that doesn't work. That doesn't sound right when I say it like that.
But I saw the winter fan art for Henis. That was really cool. I saw the winter art, But as you said, because you build things organically, you were able to amass a community that is really, who believes in the project, not just like the hype swap, the Moon Boys. And you were able to build a technology, because I was going to ask you, like, how are you going to fully utilize this de-aging or aging NFT technology? But I do believe that in your previous AMA, you did answer that you're working with other IPs as well. And I think that is a beautiful thing, because you're onboarding other IPs into NFTs and also creating a new way, setting a new standard of how trading cards should be. Because besides just a 3D animation, what you're doing is that your player is really something that you can interact with the card, you can make modifications, you could click on certain aspect and zoom in and zoom out. So I think that's really cool. And for people who are watching this, and if they want to support you, definitely check out your website, follow you on Twitter, and you know, participate in the community. It's a very welcoming community. And Todd, thank you so much. And do you have anything to say before we wrap up?
I think that's great, man. I just want to thank you so much for the opportunity. This has been a blast. You're doing a great job. And like you said, anyone that wants to jump into the adult fantasy pool, we're not porn. Comic porn. Nerd
Dungeon Dragons.
It doesn't work. I don't know. We just love hanging out, and we're building something together, and we'd love to have anyone who's interested in Vision.
And to be honest, I'm glad I let my curiosity take the better side of it, because when someone sent me this project, I was looking at the name and I was like, oh, should I click into it? It's gonna be one of those Wahoo projects. You know, it's gonna be those things. And I was like, all right, let me check it out. I click. Oh wow, this is a hidden gem. This is like so cool. So I hope that people could watch this video and get to know more what this is about.
I love that.
It's a fantasy world by a group of adults.
For sure, exactly. And I love that. I mean, I love having to be like, oh God, what am I doing? And it's really funny. I'll just give you this one last thing. It's really funny because the name sounds so provocative, and it sounds like something you would not want on your browser history. But coming up with it, when I was a kid, it was, well, even before I was born, comics were seen as juvenile delinquency. It was something that would rot your kids' brains, and at least in the States, it was under attack from Congress. Like it was considered like very bad, and it almost got banned here in the States, like full censorship. And so it was juvenile delinquency, and then it became the stuff for children's fare, right? So when I was buying comics, even though I was a teenager, it was the stuff of children. Why you're reading that only kids read comics, right? And then when I was in college, it became like male fantasy. It was like, oh, male power fantasy. Oh, why are you reading that male fantasy crap? So it just seemed like the next logical step from juvenile delinquency and childhood fare would be adult fantasy. And the funny thing is that, while it seems like it's such a provocative title and something that, you think it's going to be like dirty or whatever. If you really think about it, it's not like, here's what I like about it. There's nobody on this planet that I know of that knows how to use the internet that wants to look at pornography that is going to go to Google. Hello, Google. Please show me some adult fantasy tonight. What kind of like? That's not how you search. Like nobody searches for that. Like they search for the things they want to see. You know what I mean? So it's when you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, like that's it's. So it's I love the pun. I love the you have to have a little bit of bravery to click on it. And I think the people that do, most people fall in love with it and want to stay. So
maybe there could be some crossover.
Yeah,
you could buy certain keywords.
That's what Heinous is for.
That's right. Oh, thank you so much for being here, Todd, and thank you all of the audience and Team Heinous for being here as well.
Team Heinous represent.
And if you feel free to, if you like the content, like and subscribe. If you are new to adult fantasy, check out their website, check out their project. It's really cool. And thank you so much for being here, and live life non-fungibly. Bye. Thank you, Todd.
Bye. Thank you so much.